My name is Dan Allen. I'll go through my role and how tonight came to be, but the scope of this evening is about making math accessible for all learners, specifically students with special education needs, some tips and some strategies we can use as parents at home to support their students' math learning. And this is put on in consultation with academic services, where I work at the school board office, as well as DCPIC, which is the Durham Catholic Parent Involvement Committee, who contacted me about doing some math sessions for our families. Before we get into the presentation, though, we'll begin in prayer. I'll ask you to join me in the sign of our faith. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. God of truth, light and truth, thank you for giving me a mind that can know and a heart that can love. Help me to keep learning every day of my life, for all knowledge leads to you. Grant me the grace to put my mind to use, exploring the world you have created, confident that in you there is a wisdom that is real. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. And of course, as always, we begin with our land acknowledgement. We here in the Durham region respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island. Before I begin my formal presentation, I just wanted to say a quick thanks to our friends from Dennis O'Connor. So the students that were over here facilitating games for you tonight are here on their own time, volunteering to help us out. We really appreciate it. So they came this evening. Once you folks are good and packed up, you're welcome to go. Have a great night, and thank you again for helping us out, okay? Thank you. So again, my name is Dan Allen. My role is board math lead for Durham Catholic District School Board, which is actually it's a new role last year. Every school board in Ontario has one individual responsible for overseeing math professional development for teachers, facilitating math nights like this for you folks, working with senior administration team on the board improvement plan, working on provincial reports for our board math plan. So that's my role with Durham Catholic. Prior to this role, I was the principal at All Saints Catholic Secondary in Whitby. I was vice principal at All Saints and vice principal at St. Mary, and I was a consultant and a high school math teacher before all of that. So when this role of board math lead came up, I was very excited because it kind of brings my two worlds together, my world of school level leadership along with my world of math education. So very excited to be here with you tonight. And again, your attendance here tonight, you're here because of your kids, right? And that's why we're all here as well, to talk about some strategies that we can use to help out at home, and some tips and hints and things that you can use as well with your students, with your school, as well as home. Along with me here this evening is Lisa Shaw. I don't know where Lisa, did I lose her? Lisa is one of our math facilitators with academic services. I think she's over there talking to the kiddos. And then we also had support in putting this presentation together by Teresa Escara. She couldn't join us here tonight, but she's a coordinator with student services. That's our special education branch of the school board, as well as Natalie Reed, who is a consultant for mathematics. She also couldn't make it here this evening, but she works with me in academic services. So I know we did a little bit of math over here with our friends from Dennis O'Connor, but when I like to do math PD with people, I like to actually do some math as well. And so we're going to do a little activity here around paper folding, okay? So I brought just a blank piece of paper and a one-hole punch. These are actually very hard to find, by the way. I had to go buy one, and I went to a couple different places to pick one up. And we're going to do an activity around paper folding. So I'm going to ask you to just kind of play along with me here for a moment. I have this piece of regular 8 by 11 paper. I'm going to fold it in half. And I'm going to fold it in half again. Okay. So the fold there's a fold here and a fold here, and it's open at the bottom here. And I'm going to take my one-hole punch, and I'm going to punch a hole in this paper. So again, it's a folded edge here and a folded edge right there. So I'm going to put that here, one hole. Okay? And so what I want you to do is I want you to think about what that paper is going to look like when I unfold it. Okay? Sometimes it helps if you close your eyes to kind of visualize what it's going to look like. But I want you to think about it in your mind's eye, what this is going to look like when it's unfolded. And once you have a sense of that, I'm going to ask you just to turn to your elbow partner, the person to your left or right, and describe to them what you think this is going to look like when I unfold it. And there's no trick questions. So I can hear people talking about the number of holes. I can hear people talking about the location of those holes. And we're going to finally see what the result is. So I'll unfold it. And I'll unfold it again. Okay. Did that match what anybody was thinking it might look like? Close? Okay. We'll talk about the significance of this in just a moment, but I will come back to this. I'm just going to put this down below for now. The very first thing I want to begin this presentation with is just talking about the importance of the home-school connection. So I'm going to be sharing some sort of higher level information with you this evening. I'll be sharing some resources with you tonight as well. But it is very, very important that you are a partner with your home school around your child's education. In all subject areas, in math especially, but in all subject areas. And the reason for that is that you know your kids best. So when I was a principal and a vice principal in schools, I would regularly sit down at team meetings and discuss IEPs of students. We'll talk about areas where they have their strengths, areas where they have their challenges, accommodations that we can make as a school to meet learning needs, modifications that may be necessary as well, but you play a crucial role in that. And that IEP should be reviewed on an annual basis. So you should be getting the IEP home and having consultation. If things are changing, because we know that young people change remarkably over the years, you're communicating that with the school, so you're working in partnership with them. Okay? So again, regular review, regular input on the IEP, and that's true in the elementary years, but it continues right through high school as well and even beyond. And again, the role of the family, we had some games here tonight that we were playing because math just isn't for the classroom. There are a lot of opportunities for us to bring mathematics into the conversations at home. And so we as a parent, we have to look for those opportunities. I've got two kids myself. They're a little older now, they're 19 and 21, but when we see opportunities for math at home, we try to take them as best we can. So for example, if you have a younger child, it could be as simple as a counting activity. It could be one of the games we played here tonight. For older students, intermediate students, we had a session in November, and we talked about financial literacy, and we talked about opportunities for students to do some budgeting. So do some simple budgeting. If you have a budget of $50, what can you go to buy at the grocery store? We need to make dinner. How much is this going to cost? All those conversations you can have in an ongoing way with your students. One of the other pieces we always focus on with young students and with older students is their mindsets around mathematics. So this evening, hopefully you had a chance to grab one of the bookmarks. Those bookmarks have a QR code on them, and that QR code will take you to our board math website for parents. And on that site, there's a bunch of different resources, but one of them specifically talks about math mindsets and encouraging positive attitudes towards math. And I'm going to just show you really quickly here one of the videos that is available for families on that website.
Researchers have studied people who've reached a very high level of achievement to see how they got there. And they found that nobody was born with a special brain, but they engaged in a very particular kind of practice. And the researchers described it like this. They said that the people who achieved the most were those who were always pushing at the edge of their understanding, making mistakes, correcting them, making more mistakes. They weren't getting work correct all the time, they were always struggling. They set high targets for themselves, and if they became stuck, they tried a different approach so that they could keep going. Researchers also found that there really are no limits to what people can do. When people don't go on to high achievement, it's usually because they give up, not because they've hit actual roadblocks that they can't get past. So always remember that when you're struggling, even if that can feel really hard, that's the very best time for your brain. And keep going. Never give up on maths. Always remember you can learn anything. Researchers have...
So this individual speaking to us here this evening is Dr. Jo Boaler from Stanford University in the US, in California. And her research is around growth mindset and something called neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the fact that your brain changes as you learn. The physical structures in your brain change. Neurons and synapses grow and modify to meet your learning needs. That one video is just one quick example of some of the resources available for families, but I will show you on the website, the Board Math website, under Encouraging Positive Attitudes Towards Math, you'll see a bunch of different resources there, including downloadable resources, videos, links to her website. So her website was shown at the end there, U Cubed, and she has basically a celebration of math learning around growth mindset, great questions, the fact that everybody makes mistakes in math, and it's when you make those mistakes in math that your brain actually grows. If we do questions all the time that we know the answers to and get them right all the time, we're not learning anything. We learn when we make those mistakes. The provincial policy document, this is also available online, is called Learning for All, and this is the policy document for special education in Ontario. It provides all of the different strategies and educational approaches that we use on a daily basis to meet the learning needs of students. It includes recommendations for assessment for learning, so that is using assessments to make instructional decisions. So we call those diagnostic assessments sometimes. So I may do some math questions with students, see where their areas of weakness are, and then I do some targeted work there. Something called universal design for learning. So universal design is more of like the doors over here on the far end of the cafeteria have a push bar because that is accessible for everybody to be able to access. So it's necessary for some, but beneficial for all. And that same mindset is when we implement different instructional strategies, we also use what's called universal design for learning. So I may have some instructional strategies that are necessary for some, but they benefit all of my students, and I implement them across the board. So in this policy document, it does specify that research confirms gaps in student achievement can be narrowed and overall improvement in achievement can be attained if the responsibility for making these changes is shared by all partners in the education system. And this is what I was talking about a little bit earlier, is that parents, educators, community partners, all the different pieces of the puzzle that come together to form your child's education have to work in collaboration. And the second point that it makes specifically is that there's been a sustained and deliberate focus on strengths and needs, assessment for learning, and precision in instruction through evidence-informed interventions. So what that means is, as educators, we may do a diagnostic assessment on a student, we may do a psychoeducational assessment on a student, and then we use the data from those assessments to make instructional decisions. The reality is, with students with special education needs, every case is unique. And so that's why it's so important that we use data to make decisions around instructional practices, and that's why it's important that you read and carefully review that IEP for your student so you know the modifications and accommodations that should be in place for them. Another piece as a parent, again, is the curriculum. So oftentimes we kind of take for granted that, the students go to school and they learn what they're supposed to learn in grade 3. But for parents, there's a lot of resources out there for us that we can use to help guide our child's learning. So this is a link to the math curriculum. If you just Google Ontario curriculum, you're going to land on these sites. But at the top, you're going to see an arrow, you see a point there that says parents, and that's where you're going to want to go and do a little bit of reading. If you click on that, you will pull up resources for parents, and they have a bunch of different curriculum guides. So this is the elementary one, and you'll see resources for parents, so something called TVO Learn. TVO Learn has full lessons for students, as well as free online math tutoring for students in grades 4 through 12. So that's available for every student in Ontario. It's actually live tutoring with real Ontario certified teachers. It's not like 24/7, but it is 7 days a week, and they have their hours posted on there, but it would be basically any kind of reasonable hour that a student might be working on schoolwork, like from 9 a.m. until 10 p.m., something along those lines. Along with the TVO Learn, there are parent curriculum guides. So these are overviews of what your child is supposed to learn in language, social studies, science, technology, mathematics is there, physical education. And then if you go below this, you'll have the secondary. And again, there's a whole list of parent guides available to you. So again, as a parent, you'll want to have a look at those. And if your child's coming home and they're struggling with some content, maybe you can look to see, is this in the curriculum? Where should they be? This goes through grade by grade what they should be learning at each level. Specific to math, this is directly from the curriculum document. I'll just give you a moment to maybe read this. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I'll let you read it for a moment, then we'll talk about some important points. So when I look at that, first of all, it's that belief that all students can learn and do mathematics. And that goes back to what Dr. Joe Buller was saying as well, is that every child is capable of learning mathematics. Some of the research, like I remember when I was in school, we had like the time tests and you had to get them done in 60 seconds or else, right? But what the research says is that speed, that time doesn't matter. People who are mathematicians, who are solving mathematics problems, who are solving engineering problems, aren't working under a clock. They're solving problems in community. They're solving problems that take a long time to think about. And so we want to foster that sort of thinking with our students as well. We want math that is culturally relevant and responsive. We want math that matters to our kids, that context that they understand. The next piece I see in here is conceptual understanding, which is interesting because we always focus on things like math facts. Like we want students to know that 6 times 4 is 24, but I also want students to know why 6 times 4 is 24. So I can take that learning and then extend it to 60 times 40, for example. So we want the conceptual understanding. We want procedural fluency. I know if you look in the media at all about math education, sometimes people talk about like discovery math versus like old school math. The reality is it's a balanced approach. So your teachers in your schools are doing some elements where students are doing some problem solving and learning through problem solving, but they're also teaching those procedures that we knew growing up as well. We want skill development, communication, and problem solving skills, because at the end of the day, solving problems is what math is all about. This diagram is from NCTM. NCTM is the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. It's a big mouthful, but that is a United States national math organization. And they talk about these different strands of math proficiency. So we have adaptive reasoning, strategic competence, conceptual understanding, productive disposition, and procedural fluency. And again, those different elements align with the Ontario curriculum. And again, these different elements of math proficiency are things that we look at. So we look at all those different elements in terms of students' understanding and try to target each of them individually. Another big piece of learning that we've done, and this is especially important for students with special education needs, is something called the concrete diagrammatic symbolic continuum of learning. Again, that's another big mouthful. But what this is showing mathematics in a variety of representations. So if you have a student who has a processing difficulty, showing them mathematical concepts in a variety of ways, hands-on concrete tools, pictures, abstract with numbers, the more different ways you can show students those mathematical concepts, the more likely it is that they'll be able to recall them and that they'll be able to make connections between them. And I think that an important thing to note here is that the goal is not to end up at abstract every time. The goal is to kind of work in between those two things. And you may have students that are very strong at the abstract part of mathematics, and then you want to focus on maybe getting them to understand the concrete, or the pictorial. So this is, again, a strategy that is an evidence-based strategy for supporting students with special education needs in math understanding. And it's something that as a school board, when we do professional learning with our teachers, we talk about this all the time. How can we show it concretely? How can we show it in a diagram? How can we show it abstractly? Our paper folding. So again, we did this activity. So this activity is a fun little activity, and it is simple. And you'll notice as well, the games that we played over here had relatively simple math. But sometimes the concepts themselves are this is easily accessible, but the concept is something we don't necessarily think about. So the skill that we're using when we think about unfolding paper and rotating and orienting this in different ways is something called a visual spatial skill. So when you look at different strands in the Ontario math curriculum, one of them is geometry and spatial reasoning, and geometry and spatial sense, and that goes along with this sort of an activity. So spatial visualization is the ability to perceive complex spatial patterns and comprehend imagery movements in space. My wife actually, she works in the dental field, and when she was first trained to become a dental assistant way back, she had to, when you're working in dentistry, you've got to work in someone's mouth upside down and backwards because you're here and they're kind of laying that way. And so she had a lot of different activities where you're thinking about rotating and flipping images, and can you do that in your mind? Because that's the way you have to work with a mirror in someone's mouth. And so these are different skills that when practiced, we get better at. So the one that we just did here is the paper folding. We call it the 3 V's. So the first thing I asked you to do was to visualize it. So think about it. We talk about in your mind's eye, to visualize this piece of paper being unfolded, to visualize a cube being rotated with different numbers on it. Then we verbalize it. So I asked you to talk to your elbow partner about that, right? And I heard people using different pieces of language. You talked about the number of holes, the position of the holes, the way that rotated, and then finally verifying through actually unfolding the paper. So visualize, verbalize, verify. And again, this is an activity you could do, and I could maybe I put 2 holes in. What does that look like? Or I put the hole in this corner. What does that look like? So all those different skills, we get better at those skills as we practice. So some specific strategies to support visual spatial skills. We talked about this a little bit already, but mathematical models and different ways of knowing. So in math, we use something called a tens frame. A tens frame is literally 2 rows of 5, and we use that to represent tens because our number system is a base 10 system. And what research says is if students are better at using tens frames, then they are better at place value, better at adding, subtracting, multiplying, and so on. I'll show you, I know we don't have necessarily tens frames at home, but I'll show you later on a site you could use that has what's called virtual manipulatives. So instead of having the tangrams, they have virtual tangrams that are on this website that you can access. They're all there and they're all free. Manipulatives to support learning. Visualization, mental rotations, composing and decomposing shapes. So a lot of times when we talk about shapes, we start off with squares, triangles, circles. But as you go into intermediate math and in secondary math, you have complex shapes, composite shapes. So maybe it's a square with a rectangle and something else, almost like those tangram puzzles. And so students who are better at mentally decomposing those complex shapes into simpler shapes do better at the geometry tasks. Another suggestion would be to make connections between mathematical representations and things at home. So if you're going to go for a walk, maybe you're going to look for 3D solids in architecture. When I came in here tonight, I was actually, this caught my attention. It actually reminded me of some of the tangram pieces we have over here, right? So there's geometry all around us. Sometimes it blends into our surroundings, but if we look for it, we'll see things. So again, this is the board math website. This is the same site that QR code is going to take you to. And in that site, under suggested website for families, is virtual manipulatives. And so if you were to click on that tile, you will land on this page. And on this page, there's something called Polypad. So Polypad is free online digital manipulatives that students can access on an iPad, on a Chromebook, any kind of a device. And if you click on that link, you will end up here. And so On the top left there, that is a tens frame showing 6. You see the tangram pieces are in there too. You have dice, number tiles, number lines, fractions. You can even get into secondary algebra tiles through this website. So again, this is linked to you and available for free through the board website, through this Amplify Polypad site. Okay. Visual spatial working memory. Again, we talked about that paper folding task. When we practice tasks like that, we actually get better at holding some of that imagery in our mind. And that is something that, again, practicing these types of tasks, practicing using your visual spatial working memory, you can improve it, okay? So there are different tasks you can do to improve that, including using manipulatives, talking about rotations, flips, talking about unfolding and folding paper. All those different things would support visual spatial working memory. And there's research out there that says that spatial reasoning is actually a very strong predictor of future math success, even more so than number sense. So if you have good spatial reasoning at a young age, or you foster that with young children, the more work you do with visual spatial reasoning, the better their math trajectory will be later on. So again, we talked about the 3 V's: visualize, verbalize, verify. So again, I use that term with students all the time. Use your mind's eye. Close your eyes, sorry, if it helps you. Don't close your mind. Close your eyes if it helps you. And then verbalize it. And give them time to actually articulate what it is they're thinking about or seeing, and then verify through actually unfolding. Using manipulatives, using models, engaging in math talk, connecting the concepts in meaningful contexts, scaffolding, so starting with simpler examples and moving up. The use of mnemonics is another thing, and I'll show you a website where you can find even more information about that, but a mnemonic is something like BEDMAS is one that we used in the past, or brackets, exponents, multiplication, division. So there's mnemonics, we can use those to help remember different concepts. There are some mnemonics that people use for problem solving, like one of them in secondary they use a lot is called GRASP. It's given, required, ASP, the rest of it. I'm drawing a blank on that right now, but I will show you a resource that will show you some of that information. And again, also the use of formula sheets and worked examples. So especially for students who have memory deficiencies, we always provide formula sheets. Students shouldn't have to memorize formulas. On the EQAO assessments in grade 3, 6, and 9 math, they're provided formula sheets right in the assessment itself. So those should be accessible to students at all times. So I did want to share some specific resources with you. Again, these are things that you can find through our board website, but I wanted to point something out specifically. LDAO.ca is the Learning Disabilities Association of Ontario. There are great resources there. Again, learning disabilities is a wide variety of different elements to those sites, but that is a great place to go. The LD at School website is education specific. And I am going to jump out of this slide deck for just a moment and show you what that website looks like. So I'll just escape out of here, slide over here. And this is LD at School. So LD at School, again, is education focused with specific resources for families. If I click on Learn About LDs or mouse over that, there'll be a drop down that follows. You'll see literacy, math, mental health, executive functioning, social emotional, etc. I will just show you the math one really quickly here. So there are articles here. There are different learning modules that you can do as a parent as well. These are great resources. Again, here's some different articles. Here's a learning module around concrete, representational, abstract. So I use the term concrete, diagrammatic, symbolic, but this is the same thing. Some of the research out of, I believe it's Australia, they use the term representational and abstract, but it means the exact same. Again, helping students with LDs to learn math programs. And there are resources, let me just, I'm looking for the one with the mnemonics on it. It is here. I'll get there, I promise. Oh, here's one here. So here's some mnemonics as well for problem solving, right? So again, this is not going to be required for all students, but for some students who need it, this is very helpful, right? So they use the mnemonic fast draw, and then fast draw kind of reminds students, here are the different steps I have to take to solve this math problem. Again, not all students will benefit from this, but if you have a student that might, again, you could ask your school team if that's something that should be included as part of the IEP as a strategy so the educator knows as well, and then they can work together to solve this. Okay. Again, the other link that's at the bottom there, that is the same link as the QR code that you have on that bookmark. So that is our DCDSB Math Resources for Families. That website is on our main board website, as well as any of our elementary schools. If you go to an elementary school and click on math on your elementary school site, it will also end up at that same place, okay? We've talked a little bit about this. This is the LD at School website. Again, a great resource there for families. The games you played tonight. So games are a great way to incorporate number sense where students are doing math, but it doesn't feel like they're sitting down doing worksheet after worksheet. And so the games that you played here tonight are on that website under Quick and Easy Math Games. It's available there to you, along with some other web-based games. So there's Multiplication by Heart is a great game for students who want to learn number facts. Factress is another game, both by Mathagon. There are more links to playing games with cards and dice there as well, but there's no shortage of that. And the other part is, if you can't find a game, or you think, I want a game that involves something, you can actually ask ChatGPT to make you a game. So that's one benefit about having AI now too, is if you want a card game that involves, I don't know, puppies, you could say to ChatGPT, I want a card game appropriate for a 7-year-old that involves puppies, and it'll spit it out to you, and you can use that, right? And it's great. It's a great tool. It really is. So I just wanted to loop back to what we started off with here as well, and that is the importance of the homeschool connection. You know your children best, and working in collaboration with your school team, your program support teacher, your principal, your classroom teacher, you're going to be a big part of the puzzle of working with your child's education. And you want to make sure that you're part of that you're reviewing the IEP on a regular basis, that you're communicating as things change at home, and that if you're seeing things at home that you think your child needs, to advocate that with that school team. Okay, it's really important. Again, every child is unique regardless, but especially those with special education needs. You play an important part of that conversation, and so I really would recommend educating yourselves around some of the different curriculum links I showed you here tonight, but then also working in collaboration with that school team, especially if your child is working on an accommodated or a modified program. Okay, well, again, I thank you for coming out on a cold February night. We do appreciate you. We were joined here by Paula Surratt as well. Paula is one of our other superintendents with the school board, and so she's here with us this evening as well. But we do appreciate you coming out on a cold February night, and thank you for your time here.